We have some breaking news on this Sunday afternoon as the Philadelphia Eagles and Howie Roseman have made yet another August trade. You're watching Eagles Now. My name is Chase Senior, and when I tell you that whenever breaking news happens, regardless of where I am, I'm going to talk about it, dissect it, and break it down here on the show, I'm not lying to you. I got the notification from Adam Schefter on my phone. I pulled over, and here I am in the driver's seat of the whip. In park, of course, talking about this move for Philadelphia that I simply did not see coming. So let's talk about it here. The Eagles are trading tight end Harrison Bryant and a fifth-round pick to the Houston Texans in exchange for wide receiver John Metchie and a sixth-round pick. Now, this has been Howie Roseman's MO, that if he feels a need to improve the roster, address a position of need, make Philadelphia better, he is going to make a move. And specifically in the month of August, this has been Howie Roseman's track record. 2 Monday nights ago, we were talking about this trade for cornerback Jacorian Bennett. And at that cornerback position specifically, that was a position that we have discussed all throughout the offseason as being a major question mark for Philadelphia going into 2025. Darius Slay signed a 1-year, $10 million deal with the Pittsburgh Steelers. He goes across the state for a vaunted defense with Pittsburgh. Isaiah Rodgers, who I think the Eagles should have kept, signed a 1-year, $7+ million deal with the Minnesota Vikings. He's now flourishing under one of the best defensive coordinators in the NFL in Brian Flores, and he is going to start for one of the best defenses in the NFL with the Vikings. And I had a feeling that the Eagles were going to make a trade at that cornerback spot because clearly Howie Roseman, Vic Fangio, Nick Sirianni, and this entire Eagles operation were not sold on Kelee Ringo or Adoree Jackson at that cornerback spot. None of those players really did what they had to do to run away with that job and win it. Here we are 2 weeks through the preseason, and we still do not know who is going to be cornerback 2 and start opposite of Quinyon Mitchell. So they bring in Jacorian Bennett, former fourth-round pick, who earned a starting job with the Las Vegas Raiders in 2023. He has played very well when healthy. He has 4.3 speed, and yesterday, in his debut with Philadelphia, he had a really nice pass breakup on a shallow cross, showing off that 4.3 speed. He has some physicality to his game, and you can see what the Eagles saw in him to bring him in to that cornerback mix. He's now going to compete alongside Kelee Ringo, Adoree Jackson, Mac McWilliams, and Eli Ricks to start on the other side of Quinyon Mitchell. But we have not been talking about wide receiver as a position of need for Philadelphia because of what has transpired throughout camp and what has happened throughout the preseason. And so that's why I think this trade for John Metchie is fascinating, because of what it says the Eagles are thinking potentially at that specific position, but the player who the Eagles are bringing in, who I think could end up being a pretty solid player for Philadelphia. And let's first talk about the wide receiver spot, right? We know who the top 3 wideouts are going to be heading into this year. And this is an Eagles offense that goes into 2025 looking to defend their Super Bowl championship. I know that they like to say we're not defending Super Bowl champs, but they are. And you have to feel really good about the offensive personnel because they returned 10 of 11 starters for a team that won the Super Bowl last year and cut through that Chiefs defense like a warm knife through butter. And the only starter who doesn't come back to Philadelphia is Mekhi Becton. And Tyler Steen has been having a really good camp and preseason at right guard. But at wide receiver, you have A.J. Brown. You have Devonta Smith. You have Jahan Dotson. Now, going into camp, we weren't sure the players who were going to lock down the wide receiver 4, 5, and 6 jobs. But what has happened the first 2 weeks of the preseason? Specifically in the preseason opener, Johnny Wilson played awesome. He finally used his physicality to his advantage, and at 6'6", catching 3 balls from Tanner McKee specifically, they were highly impressive plays, where he climbed up the ladder, went up and got it, ripped it off a defender's helmet, and he Randy Mossed some DBs, living up to the 6'6" size. At Florida State, Johnny Wilson was a player who sometimes played smaller, was sloppy with his route running, and had a lot of drops. But not only did he play well against Cincinnati, and I was very impressed with what he did, Tanner McKee threw those 50-50 balls up to him, had confidence that he was going to make a play, and he did. But then yesterday against Cleveland, he only played 8 snaps, and then the Eagles yanked him. That tells me he is making the team. He was on the roster bubble going into the preseason because up until that point, he hadn't done anything in training camp. Anaya Smith, like Johnny Wilson, was drafted by the Eagles in 2024, but was on the roster bubble going into the preseason. What did Anaya Smith do in that first preseason game against Cincinnati? He popped off a long punt return. That's a way for him to make the team if he can impact games as a receiver and on special teams, and the return was nice. Showed some open field speed and elusiveness, caught a touchdown from Tanner McKee, and then yesterday against Cincinnati, he caught a big third down catch on a in-slant from Dorian Thompson-Robinson, and then he caught another touchdown. And he is clearly developed, like Johnny Wilson, at wide receiver. I think he is going to make the team. And then the Eagles have this UDFA hidden gem sensation in Darius Cooper out of Tarleton State, who last year in 2024 was arguably the best wide receiver in FCS, had nearly 1,500 receiving yards, 14 touchdowns, ran in the 4.4s, 5'10", 210, very similar testing numbers to A.J. Brown. His relative athletic score, really good. And in the first preseason game against Cincinnati, he showed that he is clearly an NFL player. He caught the 20-yard touchdown from Tanner McKee, where he was able to beat press man and then separate with some hand fighting downfield to open up a throwing window for Tanner McKee. He caught that one in-breaking route where he caught it, and like A.J. Brown does, put his foot in the dirt, cut it back to the outside, picked up yards after the catch. And then I always believe that a person's actions are telling, whether it's a friendship, whether it's your employer, whether it's a coworker, whether you're in a relationship. A person's actions are very telling. What did the Eagles do after Darius Cooper did that in the first preseason game? He started getting run with the ones because A.J. Brown is still out. Then the Eagles introduced him to special teams. He started practicing with the first team special teams unit on kickoff coverage units. And then the Eagles were using him as a return man with the first string special teams unit. And then yesterday, he didn't do all that much, but I think the Eagles are trying to hide him because if they were to cut him, I don't think he passes through waivers to come back to the practice squad. I think another team puts in a claim to add him to their team. High character guy, St. Louis native, very well spoken, fitting in perfectly with the Eagles culture. This Eagles wide receiver room really likes him. I think the Eagles really like him as a player. Again, their actions have been pretty telling. And so you have now A.J. Brown, Devonta Smith, Jahan Dotson, Anaya Smith, Johnny Wilson, Darius Cooper. Now you're adding John Metchie to the team. I don't think the Eagles are going to hold on to 7 wide receivers. Could they? Yes, they could. Trading away Harrison Bryant to Houston could open up a roster spot for a player like John Metchie. And Nick Caserio, general manager for the Texans, and Howie Roseman, they've done deals in the past. They recently did a deal, C.J. Gardner-Johnson to Houston for Kenyon Green, and they swapped, I believe, 5th-round picks. Now, this trade involves 5th-round picks. Harrison Bryant goes to Houston. They needed a tight end, but the Eagles didn't really need a wide receiver. And so do they cut an Anaya Smith, a Johnny Wilson, or a Darius Cooper to make room on the team for John Metchie? I'm trying to figure out the roster Tetris here and the roster gymnastics that Howie Roseman might be thinking about here. Because John Metchie is a really, really interesting player. He was the 44th overall pick in the second round out of Alabama. Howie Roseman brings in another SEC baller, another Alabama player, and another guy who played elite football against the best of competition in the SEC. And John Metchie picked 44th overall. He missed his rookie year because he was diagnosed with leukemia. Thank God he's okay. I know a lot of people out there are impacted by cancer, including myself. It's hit home close to me because my mom passed away from cancer back in 2018. And so he beat that. Since then, John Metchie hasn't really been able to find his stride at the NFL level. I don't think it's for a lack of ability. He's 6 foot, 195 pounds, runs really well. I think a reason why he hasn't been able to do much at the NFL level is because of the wide receivers in front of him. Houston of late has been very, very deep at the wide receiver position. And you look at them now going into 2025, Nico Collins is a stud. They added Jaden Higgins. They added Jalen Noel. They're hoping that Tank Dell can come off that nasty broken leg. Last year, they brought in Stephon Diggs. They had Robert Woods. And so John Metchie has always been behind in the depth chart. And everybody's been waiting for him to break out. And he hasn't really been able to do that. But a lot of that is because he hasn't been able to get a lot of time. And the numbers that he's put up, he played 16 games in 2023, 16 catches, 158 yards. In 2024, 24 grabs, 254 yards, and a touchdown. With this Eagles team, they are great at developing players. With Aaron Moorhead at wide receivers coach, they've done a great job of developing wide receivers. AJ, Devonta, Darius Cooper. We've seen the growth year over year for Anaya Smith. Johnny Wilson, a player like Darius Cooper. And so I am fascinated to see what the Eagles' plans are for John Metchie. His relative athletic score didn't do a lot of testing in the pre-draft. But again, when you're a top 45 pick, you're coming into the league with a lot of pedigree here. And his college numbers, very impressive. He was taken in 2022, so he did overlap with Devonta Smith. His first year at Alabama, 4 catches for 23 yards. Then in 2020, 55 catches for 916, 6 touchdowns. He was probably the number 2 alongside Devonta Smith for that Alabama team that won the Natty when Mac Jones was the quarterback in 2020. And then in 2021, 96 catches, 1,142 yards, and 8 touchdowns. Did he run a 40? Let's see. His official 40 time was recorded during his high school recruitment. He ran a 4.6 then. So a lot of people thought that he was going to run low 4.4s if he actually tested coming out of Alabama. And so I don't think that this is a player who the Eagles are going to acquire here and just cut. I think this is a player who the Eagles could develop over time. In fact, I was talking about Philadelphia trading for John Metchie last offseason when I was discussing them trading for a wideout. Instead, they traded for Jahan Dotson. But Howie Roseman's track record here of pulling off trades in the month of August is insane. And I want to run through it here, because these are just some of the moves that he's made of late. Traded for Jacorian Bennett 2 Mondays ago. Traded now for John Metchie. Acquired Jahan Dotson in 2024. Acquired Albert Okwuegbunam in 2023. Sent Jalen Reagor away in 2022. Traded for C.J. Gardner-Johnson. Traded for Gardner Minshew. This is just what Howie Roseman does. And so the latest trade acquisition here for the Birds, John Metchie to Philadelphia, and this will make the wide receiver competition very fascinating for Philadelphia. So that is the breaking news here on this Sunday. Earlier today, I put out a winners and losers from preseason game number 2. Be sure to check that video out. Thanks as always for watching. And we'll see what Howie has up his sleeve, because clearly he ain't done yet. And this is why when I did a mailbag the other day, I put it in the title. Howie Roseman making another move. For everybody who says clickbait, this is why we talk about trades. Because Howie Roseman continues to make trades. And so you can't leave anything off the table with Howie. Thanks to everybody for watching. Enjoy the rest of your Sunday. Back in the studio tomorrow, and I'll catch you soon. Peace.